I decided to extend my explanation on procurement audits and compliance since it's a very important concept that is might help you in real life also at your PMP exam. We're looking at some of these, let's say, mitigation strategies or risks that might, say, appear at the PMP exam in terms of how to handle, say, a procurement related risks. So first, let's again to recap on the importance of having a procurement, the procurement audit and compliance. We talked in the previous session about the procurement audit plays a critical role in project governance and financial accountability. And by assessing the procurement processes, contracts, and vendor performance, audits ensures the adherence to these policies and also it prevents the fraud and enhances the operational efficiency. So regular audits allows the project teams to identify cost-saving opportunities and mitigate procurement-related risks. We already have discovered this or explained this when we talked about these types of procurement audits, including the process audits to review the procurement procedures to ensure the standardization, also to assess the efficiency of sourcing, bidding, and contract awarding. We also talked about compliance audit to verify the alignment with the legal, financial, and regulatory policies, which is very critical. Also, part of the compliance audits by identifying identifying contractual breaches or ethical violations. And the third type of audit here you can perform is performance audits to measure the supplier and contract performance. Also, to ensure the procurement objectives aligns with the project goals. The financial audits here, which is the fourth type of procurement audits, is the financial audits to verify the cost accuracy, budgeting, and payment schedules. To identify also any, let's say, the fraud transactions or cost inefficiencies. So these are the main types of procurement audits that you can conduct on procurement. So all of these different types of procurement audits, it helps the organizations to evaluate the processes, client's performance, and financial management. These audits detect the inefficiencies and ensures the procurement align with the project objectives, budget, and legal requirements. Let's look at one of these procurement audit process step by step. Okay, first you need to first you start with planning the audit. Planning the audit is like you can define the audit objectives, the scope, and key performance criteria that you're gonna measure your audit based on. Also, while planning the audit, you may identify the key procurement documents and contract to review. The second step here is you need to collect data and analyze it. And to collect the data and analyze it, you start with examining the purchase order, for example, or invoices or contract agreements, and also supplier performance reports. When you examine all of these sources of data that you're gonna review or document, then you start conducting interviews with the procurement and finance teams to gather more information and to analyze it. Third step here is that you need to identify findings and risks. By identifying the findings and risk, you start with detecting the non-compliance or contract deviations or cost inefficiencies. And part also of identifying, let's say, the findings and say listing any risks that is associated with the procurement, you need to assess the vendor performance and adherence to the SLAs. It's part also of reviewing, understanding whether the vendor is meeting the agreed upon SLAs or a service level that were agreed. The fourth here, the fourth step here is reporting. So after you planned it, you set the goals, you collected the data, you identified these gaps, you detected all of these non-compliance and corrective or the contract deviations that you have found, or any cost inefficiencies, you found any vendor performance issues. breaking down the SLA. Now it's the time to report and set a corrective action plan. To report and having a corrective action plans by providing an audit recommendation and risk mitigation strategies. Finally, you need to set all of these corrective actions and set a plan to implement these corrective actions for the process improvement. By systematically following all of these steps we've talked about, evaluating the procurement activities, the organization can enhance the efficiency and ensure the compliance and minimize the financial risks. Now, how to ensure the alignment with the legal and financial policies. So, procurement compliance ensures that all of the procurement activities aligns with the legal and financial policies. By enforcing the contract law and financial regulations and ethical sourcing, project teams can avoid legal disputes and financial penalties and reputational damages. The key compliance areas here is the contract law. And by enforcing the contract law to ensure the procurement agreed or agreements aligns with the legal obligations. Financial regulations, when we talk about financial regulations, is to ensure the adhering to budgeting and invoicing and tax policies. Ensure that all of these documents or contracts or financial, say, contract is adhering with all of these regulations. The ethical sourcing by preventing, let's say, conflicts of interest and ensuring the fairness in supplier selection. This is a scenario where you know one of these sellers or vendors, and maybe you have, let's say, sourced it or have qualified it, or you have selected, or you made one of these vendors has passed the selection criteria based on a conflict of interest, which is a very important concept that you need to look in real world also on your how you have to handle it. So you need to handle it in an ethical sourcing or dealing with ethical standards to prevent any conflict of interest and ensuring that there is a fairness in supplier selection. Finally, the data privacy and security by protecting the sensitive procurement information, such as the cost of the project, the procurement costs, or whatever information that the vendors or the suppliers or let's say the stakeholders or whoever has no, let's say, right to have an access to these sensitive information. Ensure that you have a data privacy and security to protect all of these sensitive. Here are some of these key risks that you might face in procurement. Also, I've set, let's say, an example on how to mitigate them. And first, let's say procurement risk here that you might deal with is supplier non-performance. Supplier non-performance here, you can mitigate such risks by, for example, establishing a clear SLAs and vendor scorecards. The next risk here you have is contract dispute. We talked many times about contract dispute, the reasons and how to mitigate it. In our case here, let's say that you need to mitigate this risk by having or conducting regular contract reviews and dispute resolution strategies. The next procurement risk that you might deal with is fraud and corruption. Fraud and corruption is one of these big risks that might fail the whole project. And by implementing regular audit trails and anti fraud policies, can mitigate such fraud and corruption risks. We also have this risk where there is a regulatory non-compliance, which is very critical, as I mentioned, in case that you are running a project, maybe in a financial institution or in a financial organization or financial environment, you have to have compliance with all of these regulatory, or else you will face penalties and your organization will face some penalties and can cause the failure. So to mitigate such risks, ensure you as a project manager to conduct a regular compliance audits, ensure the compliance with all of these, say, laws and regulations that is running within the country. Finally, we have the budget overruns. And budget overruns, one of these risks where you can mitigate it by enforcing cost tracking and variance analysis to ensure that the vendor or the supplier is adhering to the budget of the project. Procurement risks can, again, can impact the project success. But having a proactive mitigation strategy, such as supplier monitoring, tracked governance, and fraud prevention controls, helps reducing the vulnerabilities and improves the efficiencies. Here are some of these technology tools and automation and procurement audits that can be utilized. How the technology can enhance your audits? Can enhance it by having the automated procurement tracking that reduces the human error and fraud. Also, AI-powered data analytics to identify the spending trends and inefficiencies. E-signatures and digital contract management to enhance the security and compliance. Blockchain technology, which is very evolving and very promising technology to ensure the tamper-proof procurement records of all of these vendors and suppliers' history. Technology and automation streamlines the procurement audits by improving the accuracy, efficiency, and transparency. These digital tools where we have talked, such as the AI, blockchain, and automated tracking system, it helps the organizations to enhance the compliance and to detect procurement fraud in real time. The role of stakeholder in procurement audits. So, effective procurement audits requires a collaboration among multiple stakeholders, including the project managers. And the role of project manager here is to ensure the procurement aligns with the project goals. Also have the procurement team. Procurement team can manage the suppliers, contracts, and reports. Finance team here can conduct financial oversight on the vendor or suppliers, let's say financial, let's say history, and ensures the budget adherence. Other auditors can identify the compliance gaps and recommend some improvement. And also, some of these stakeholders might include legal advisors who can audit, let's say, the procurement term to ensure the contract compliance with the rules and regulations. So, again, effective communication audit requires the collaboration among all of these multiple stakeholders depending on the project environment. So ensures that you have multiple stakeholders who is involved when auditing the procurement processes. With their combined expertise, ensures that the procurement practices remains efficient, ethical, and legally compliant. When we talked about the last step when reporting these audits and declarations, so a structured procurement audit reports documents the key findings, the risks, and what else we have. Also, the recommendation. And this report it serves as the blueprint for improving the procurement efficiency and long-term compliance. The key components of any audit report for the procurement includes the audit finding, where it summarizes all of the procurement inefficiencies, processes, any also compliance gaps that need to be, say, dealt with. Also have one of these components which is called risk analysis. It assess the assess or yeah, it's assessment of these procurement inefficiencies and compliance gaps. It assess it in terms of financial and legal and operational risks, its impact on the organizational project itself. You also have this recommendation. The recommendation is one of these key important components of having an audit. So it's not just about findings, assessing, collecting data. Without recommendation, you as an auditor, you might not, let's say, fulfill or resolve these audit gaps. And by having an effective recommendation and corrective actions, it uses to improve the procurement processes. Finally, you have to have this implementation plan. Implementation plan, it's steps for resolving the procurement issue or implementing this recommendation. So again, recommendation, we say that it's a corrective actions to improve these procurement processes and to cover these inefficiencies that were found during audit. The implementation plan here, it ensures that there are an actual and real steps that's gonna happen to resolve these procurement or recommendation issues or recommendations. The key takeaways on this procurement audits and compliance are a part of monitoring and controlling the procurement. We talked about procurement audits to key goal here is to improve the efficiency, the transparency, and financial control. Also, it's made or it's used to ensure the compliance with the legal and financial policies, prevent any risks and disputes. We also looked at the technology, let's say, role to enhance the procurement tracking and fraud detection. And finally, we talked about effective audit, let's say, reports with its components, which provide a roadmap for the procurement process improvement.